I remember the first time they told me I was going to be a scout. And I said, that's wonderful. What do I do? Well, you find a ball player. Find a ball player? What does that mean? So they gave me a black book. I opened up the black book. The pages were blank.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the very first episode of Chasing the Invisible. I don't know how you got here. I don't know how you're watching, but I'm glad you're here. And I'm going to do a little explanation of what we're doing here, Chasing the Invisible. My name is Molly Secours, and about 10 years ago, I either lost my mind or found my heart and started making a film about baseball scouts, and that's called Scouting for Diamonds. And let me be very clear from the start here. I was not a fanatic baseball fan. In fact, I hadn't been to a game in 20 years before making this film. I was the daughter of a semi-pro hockey player and who grew up near Montreal, and I was exposed to the Expos as a young girl and had a crush on Rusty Staub, but I hadn't seen a professional baseball game and came across some people who introduced me to a guy named George Digby. And before I move on, I'd like to introduce my co-host, Chris Carminucci from the Arizona Diamondbacks. Chris?
Hello, Molly. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Excited to be here. Just excited to do this and excited to talk baseball, and what we do is going to be great.
I know. I'm excited. So I was just catching everybody up. I kind of want to give everyone an idea of why they're here, what they're in for, if they'll come back, and to understand that, this is not just only a place where we're going to talk about scouts. I'm hoping that once people meet scouts and the profession, learn a little bit more about the profession of scouting, that they might lean into baseball, because for me, it's been a decade now, and it really has. Scouts made me understand baseball on a whole different level. And we're not getting paid by a sponsor. We don't have a sponsor. I'm not selling anything. I'm not selling the MLB, but this has been a really interesting ride. And as I said just before you came on, I'd seen I'd seen the Montreal Expos play. I had a crush on Rusty Staub, and that was pretty much why I was interested in baseball. But it wasn't until 2014 when these two Little League scouts, or not Little League scouts, they were Little League coaches, came to me and they told me about a guy in Gallatin, Tennessee, named George Digby, who was a scout for the Red Sox for 65 years. And he was in his 90s, and they were concerned he had some health issues, and they just thought I might be interested in capturing some of his stories on video. So I thought, well, that sounds really great. I think it was on a Thursday, and I was going to meet him on a Monday. And I didn't know anything about George Digby, who we're going to probably talk a lot about over the next several weeks. But that was a Thursday. I was going to go meet him, I think, on a Monday, and he died over the weekend. And so I never got to meet this guy. And so I hadn't heard the stories. I really didn't know much about him. But one of them put me in touch with Wade Boggs, Hall of Famer Wade Boggs. And Wade agreed to interview with me. He was very moved by, moved by George Digby and what he had done for him. And he immediately agreed to do the interview. And so we drove down to Florida. We interviewed Wade Boggs and Mike Greenwell and Jody Reed. And there was Luke Wren. And it was then when I saw the reaction from Wade Boggs. And some people who know a lot about baseball may have an impression of Wade Boggs, but Wade Boggs interviewed with us for 90 minutes. He had said he would meet us for 15 minutes. And we spent 90 minutes together, and he got emotional several times talking about this scout. And I was like, he can't be the only baseball player that feels this way about his scout. So that's how all this started. So now you're all caught up.
And I think there's something in baseball and especially in scouting for everybody. I think it's such a different way of looking at the game that scouts have, and there's some humanity to us, I think, and there's some uniqueness to us. We're all a little bit crazy. We're all a little bit quirky. We all come from a different angle. We're all a little obsessive. We all. And by the way, Molly, hearing you tell that story where, it was a Thursday and it was a Monday, I was waiting for you to tell me what shirt you were wearing, because that's how a scout would talk. They would paint the whole picture. And, you speak like a scout, which is endearing to me and endearing to our audience as well, too, because I think people are going to learn a lot about just the uniqueness of what we do and how there's something in baseball for everybody. And I can't wait to do this.
Well, it's true, and it's interesting because, there were a couple movies out. There's Moneyball for one, and then Trouble with the Curb. And a lot of people, if people know anything about scouting, it's usually one of those two films they talk about. And you capture something. There's some truth in probably both of them.
Absolutely.
But what I gleaned from scouts, I remember sitting down one night at the computer when I was editing. I was trying to piece together what is this film going to be about? And, as I said, we started 10 years ago and we still have, we had some hiccups. Obviously, COVID shut us down, and then we lost a few scouts. And that's the other thing is, since we started filming, I think we've lost 8 of the scouts that we've interviewed, the older scouts. So little did I know when we started this that it would become what it has, and that some of these guys that I fell in love with, that made me fall in love with the game, would no longer be here. And every one of them. And we, over the next several episodes, and you and I don't know where this is going to go. We don't know how many episodes we're going to do. We're just going to put it out there. And that we have so much footage. We have, in 10 years, interviewed over 160 people. So obviously that's not in the film. And we also have a series in mind. We have so much footage. We have so many interviews, and we have so many beautiful people. And until we get the film done, we thought, well, let's get some of this out there at least, because we're never going to be able to use all the footage that we have. And like I said, some of these people aren't around anymore. And they, you aren't going to see them. And
that sounds like a great place where hi, this is Mike, the producer of the show. Just want to jump in as you're talking about all of the big plans and ideas. Not to back up the beginning, you said we're not sponsored. Maybe we are right now, Molly. Maybe this episode is chock full of commercials, and we're living on the beach collecting checks from this, and this podcast is the most profitable. So let's not, wish big things. I'm gonna go back into my
well, no,
hole,
don't go away yet. Don't go away yet.
Okay.
Here's the thing that I love about you being part. Mike is not in any way, shape, or form a baseball person or a
I've never
sports
seen
person.
a baseball in my life.
Okay.
I don't even know. Yeah.
We're gonna make you a lover. We're gonna make you love it, Mike.
I do like it. We went to a
no. Like won't be it. We're gonna make you love it. Yes.
We're not starting negative or square one. But no, not a sporto whatsoever. But I'm sure we'll get into it. I did get to go on that trip to Florida you were talking about, and meet Wade Boggs and them. And I guess this is telling. Is one thing I'll say is the coolest part about meeting Wade Boggs was that he had stills from the episode that he was on The Simpsons, signed on his wall. That is cool.
I forgot about that. I forgot about that. That's right. Yeah. That was a wonderful trip. I mean, there was so it was a game changer, and this is terrible. I forgot that you were on that trip. I'm sorry. I don't know how I did that, but anyway. But you know what? We've taken
I wasn't
23.
very memorable. I mean, that was a decade ago at this point. That was, I think that was 2024.
No, it's 2020. It was 2014. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You're right.
This is 2024. But what's interesting is we've taken 23 trips. We went to spring training, both Florida, Arizona, 4 trips there. But we've traveled to LA and Southern California, Northern California, Florida several times. We've gone up to Boston. We met with, actually, she was one of the only female scouts at the time, Robin Wallace, with the Scouting Bureau. And we will have her on the show at some point. But it's just such a romance. And I just wanted people to understand that why we're even here. I mean, for me, the story of Scouts is a love story. And I've always felt that from the very beginning. Actually, from the time that I met Wade Boggs, I was like, this is a love story. Because when you hear him talk about George Digby, and we're probably not going to see that today, but next episode, I think we'll have a little bit more of Wade Boggs. We've got a few things of him now. But what I wanted to cut to is I wanted to talk about what characters they are. Because the thing that was so fun is hearing the stories from them of the old days in scouting. We're talking the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. And many of these men, and it was most predominantly men, of course, were in their 90s when I met them. And one is Mel Didier. Mel was in his 90s when we met him in 2017, I think it was, in Arizona. And the stories are what got me. And Mike, if we can play that Mel Didier clip, I'd like to show everybody that.
Hugh Alexander, you got him. I mean, and let me tell you what, he was one of the most well-known scouts, not because he was so like the digger, had the poise, but he was a rough and tumble, drink 'em up and all that, and he'd had his arm cut off and had hit 19 or 20 home runs for Cleveland, I forget, and went home in the wintertime and got a job in a sawmill, and got his arm stuck in the deal and got his hand cut off, and then he became a scout. And we used to call him the one-arm bandit.
I love the honesty, by the way. That's so, scouty of everybody, so no holds barred,
Yeah. And trust me, we spent a day with Mel Didier. Maybe you can talk a little bit about Mel Didier, as a scout and someone that you probably met or knew about.
Well, briefly met and always knew about, obviously the great story about, him, letting Kirk Gibson know, prior to the World Series that Dennis Eckersley would go to the backdoor slider, and, the rest is history and the Dodgers winning the World Series. But everybody who is in baseball in some form or another knows Mel because he was just ever present. He was, around forever. He was a great scout. He was a great mentor. He was the kind of person that if you walked up to, he would talk to you, and he was not afraid to give you an opinion on somebody. He was not afraid to put his arm around you and say, "Hey, this is what I think of this." And, he was very welcoming. He was very kind. But he said it how it was, and he wasn't going to sugarcoat anything. And he was Molly, what we really need to get into here as we go along is they were great storytellers. Mel was a great storyteller, as you saw here. Okay. And, he just continued to do that throughout his career. And, I wish we had even more video of him. And I'm so thankful you have quite a bit of him because he's such a special person.
Well, I believe that we will in an upcoming episode. We're going to do an episode where we cover a lot about Mel's career because he was huge. I mean, yes, the Kirk Gibson thing. And for those who are not baseball fans, he gave some info. He was doing advanced scouting, right? What they call advanced scouting, where he would go out and watch the games of people in the playoffs. He would watch the players and then report back. And in the World Series in 1989, do I have the year right? Um,
1988, I thought it was, but I could be wrong on that.
Okay.
We have to double check that.
well, yeah, for some of the hard boiled, they'll check, and I'm sure
Yeah.
I'll get an email if I got it
We
wrong.
deserve an email.
We deserve an email. We'll love an email.
Yeah.
But anyway, he told them that if Dennis Eckersley, the pitcher, throws a backdoor slider, I mean, if the count is 3-2, 3 balls, 2 strikes. For those who don't know, if it's 3-2 count, he's going to throw a backdoor slider. He knew that because he had gone and watched the games in the series before that, reported back. And sure enough, in the World Series, that was the count. He threw a backdoor slider and Kirk Gibson hit a home run and they won the World Series. I mean,
He was the computer program before they had computer programs. He was the one who was tracking all these things. And we'll have to get all into this with with our audience here to explain, all the different facets of scouting and things like that. But advanced scouting is basically being able to warn your players ahead of time of the tendencies of the other team. And, he did that to a T. He broke it down, and it just so happened that the worlds collided at the perfect moment that we worked our whole lives for, and he helped win them a World Series. He never tried to take what Gibson did away from him, obviously, and you shouldn't, but he was a part of that. And Kirk gave him a ton of the accolades that he should have, and he was completely selfless. And every time he talked about it, he talked about Mel, and I love that. I love that whole because what we're getting at, Molly, here, and what you were talking about earlier is the scout and the player are intertwined. Okay, the scout, the player, the coach are intertwined, and it's this, it's this tangle of things that that continue to grow over time. And sometimes one's needed, sometimes it's not needed, but you continue to work with each other to make sure you protect each other and help each other.
If I could just hop in, and again, I feel like I'm going to be permanently in the sort of don't know what I'm talking about camp, but
yes.
that stuff is so fascinating. Of just, you imagine that there's people who are really good at hitting balls and catching balls and get up into the big leagues, and then they go out and maybe a coach tells them do this, do that, but it's like there's a whole, it sounds like, intelligence network that goes back from finding players and understanding what they're doing that season and what to do. And it makes sense from the little bit I know about the sabermetrics or the Moneyball of it all, that it eventually wound up literally just using computers to try to brute force all of that information. And I don't know if trying to make something more universal by appealing to math is really the way to bring in an audience, but it's super interesting that it's not just, oh, we go out and try. It's this is a lot of money. This is a huge contracts. This is a lot of clout, and people are doing everything they can from the beginning to make sure they do the best job possible is what I've been getting from all this.
Yeah, the thing is that information is always good. And the more information you can give a player, the more information you can give a team to be able to go out there and defend themselves, so to speak, in a game format, the better. Sometimes there is analysis to paralysis. Sometimes there is too much information that you can give to a player. That's, by the way, where the scout becomes really good and the coach becomes really good about being able to decipher that information and hand it off, because you don't want the player to be overwhelmed by too much. But yeah, no, it's an interesting part of our game, and it's something that's ever changing, but I think one thing that I can tell you for sure as a scout for a long time that everybody will agree on: information is good. All right. And we need to continue that. And, where analytics and scouting have always been on kind of opposite sides of the spectrum, I think what's coming more and more and more is that they have to work together to be able to give information, because, again, information's good, and you want to be able to hand that off so the player is prepared. And the last thing I want to say on this is, we always think
it's
about
not the last thing you're going to say.
No, but I don't, you're absolutely right. But at the same time, we always think about players as like a pickle jar. You try to get that top off that pickle jar. You hand it to the next person, and they try it. They say, "Hey, I can't get it." And they hand it off to the next person. "Hey, I can't get it." And you keep sending it around. All of a sudden, sometimes the weakest guy in the room pops it off. And, but it took everybody in that room trying to get that pickle jar open to be able to get it done. And, and sometimes, as we know with anything, nothing's a straight line. Okay. There are so many ups and downs and, to a player's career and to winning a game that it takes a village 100%. And it takes the analytics, it takes the scouting, and it takes it all working together. And for God's sakes, let's all work together to try to make our teams the best we can. That's what I wanted to say.
Well, okay. So there's a couple things that you said that are interesting. One is that you mentioned about, just the right amount of information, not overwhelming them. And I remember talking to two different people, and one was Ben Zobrist when he was with the Cubs, and the other was Stephen Wright when he was with the Red Sox. And Ben was talking about how you can have too much information. And he just said, there's only so much you can take in. We want it, but the last thing I want to be, and I'm not going to paraphrase it because it was like 9 years ago. But then Stephen Wright was talking, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about this, Chris. Stephen Wright was talking about as a pitcher, and Stephen is a knuckleball pitcher. That's what he's known for. And he was saying that it can really be overwhelming when there's too much coming at you. And sometimes, and also George Brett was talking about this. It's like you want information, but it's just how much, and maybe is some of this information more for the front office? Is it for the players? I mean, what's the balance in that?
Well, the balance is the person, okay? So every player is different. Everybody takes information and processes it differently, okay? So I think the big thing and the big mistake we in baseball make is we kind of treat everybody the same. We think, well, this person learns like this, so obviously that person's going to learn like that. No, they're snowflakes, 100% snowflakes. They are all different. And you have to know, and this is where you have to have some kind of, emotional intelligence here to be able to read the person and know when you're overloading them, right? Know when you need to leave them alone, know when you need to give them this information. And, for me, I want that player going into the game prepared, but I also want him when he gets into the game to be able to just let it flow naturally. Okay. That's why coaching in a game, I came from the coaching world. Okay. I was a coach for a long time before I was a scout. And I always said, I'm going to do my coaching prior to the game. And then in the game, I'm just going to worry about their ability to process things and keep it as simple as possible, because that's the thing we forget a lot of times. We're hitting them with all this information. Here you go, here you go, here you go. He's going to do this. He's going to do that then. And what happens is the player gets completely overwhelmed, can't follow through, and ends up, just freezing, and by the way, there are some players that are savants and they can process everything you throw at them. They're few and far between. I have to tell you, they are few and far between. Most of the guys are like I was, where you had to pick one thing, work on that, and try to utilize that and do that in the game. So we just have to keep it simple, but we also have to know the player and the person, because there's a person behind that uniform and behind that number that we tend to forget about, and we got to keep that in mind.
It's interesting because what you were describing reminds me of once upon a time in one of my other lives 100 years ago. I was an actor for a short period of time until I realized that was not my thing. But I did a bunch of Shakespeare, and I loved Shakespeare. But there was a certain point where, you scan the text and you break it down in iambic pentameter. It's all in iambic pentameter. And at some point you just throw it away and get out there, and it's the raw emotion. It's you have to allow for the window to be open. It's like you learn the lines and then you get out there and then you're, communing with whatever that is, which is, I imagine, the same as when you're on the field.
And baseball is very Shakespearean, by the way, just to connect all the dots here, okay? Because you have every emotion and everything going through. But yeah, no, it's 100%. You have to know when to interject and when to just leave them alone. And by the way, the biggest thing a player needs to learn is how to fail. Okay, it's a game built on failure, and unless you learn how to deal with that, you're never going to make it. And that's why when I'm talking to a young player's parents, let them fail. Let him fail. He needs to be able to, or she needs to be able to learn how to take that and then processing information when you're failing and processing information when you're winning are two totally different things and two totally different skill sets. It's very easy to process things when you're feeling great. You don't have any injuries going on. Everything's going your way. But wait till things go bad, and then you've got to really learn how to process it. So it's a learning curve for everybody.
It's so funny, the similarities. It's like in music. It's like you have to be able to hit the wrong notes. You can't be afraid that you're going to hit wrong notes. I mean, I play the piano and I've been playing more lately. And I realized that the fear of hitting the wrong note was keeping me from playing.
Absolutely.
And so I like that analogy. Go ahead, Mike.
Hey, Chris, I got a question for both of you. Is baseball different in the mentality that it takes or just the way that it plays out because there's so many games in a season, and does that trickle down to scouting? Like, it seems pretty different than like playing professional football or college football where you only have like a dozen games.
It is very different. It's a long season, and everybody always uses the same term. It's a marathon, not a race. You have to be able to see the big picture, to grind it through, to understand that the best thing about baseball is you have tomorrow to be able to prove yourself again. The worst thing about baseball is you have tomorrow that you have to get ready for, and it's a never-ending season. We just got done with the World Series not too long ago. And it's the longest I had, as of all the years I've been scouting, it's the longest I had ever gone through. And I was exhausted. I even told Molly I was tired at the end of the season when normally I'm not. And, imagine how the players felt. I mean, I'm just sitting up there, thinking and, writing down my thoughts and, printing reports and things like that. Imagine the rigors the players feel and how hard that is. And the mental grind of getting on a plane after every game, after every series and doing those things. It can completely mess with you, and it can make you doubt everything that you think you thought you knew, and yourself. So it's really a mind game more than it is anything else. And by the way, just full transparency, people always joke or laugh when I say this. I don't even like sports. Okay, I don't watch football. I don't watch I don't watch basketball. Okay, I barely watch TV. Okay, I love baseball. Okay, and that's all I have ever loved and all I've ever enjoyed playing and scouting and coaching because of the way the game is played, because of the uniqueness of it and how it's not like every other sport. So it's hard for me to speak about other sports because I don't like them. I don't enjoy them. I don't watch the Super Bowl. I don't watch anything, and that's no offense to anything. I'm sure they're great athletes. I'm sure they're tremendous. It's just not interesting to me.
I have no problem believing it.
Yeah, and why was it baseball, you think?
I think baseball encouraged me just because, I was fairly good at it at a young age. I think, part of it was that, I think every male influence I ever had was kind of a disappointment. And I found that my coaches, sorry, I'll get a little emotional.
This is why I love you. This is why I love you.
Gary Hughes is talking to me right now. We'll explain who he is, but I felt like that every baseball coach I ever had a selflessness about them and would always try to give back. And I always wanted to be like that. So that's why I loved it. And that's why I do to this day. So,
wow.
Yeah, sorry.
Do not be sorry. This again, I just want to make this point. I've never met this many people in a sport, and I grew up as a daughter of a hockey player. But I've never met the kind of passion and the empathy and we'll talk about this at some point, but I mean, you don't do this for the money. Especially scouts that started doing this in the 40s, 50s, whatever. This is, it's the elevating someone else. Every person, especially these older guys, it was all about how to help someone else's dream come true.
But and I've said, Molly, I've said this to you so many times. This is a play it forward sport. It is. It is a what can I give, not what can I get. And that is beautiful to me. It has always been. And, I find that the longer I'm in it, the more people I meet that are like, the same way. And, not that other sports don't have this. I'm sure they do. But I feel like baseball is unique in the fact that you work so hard to get in, and all of us get into this game in some different capacity, in some, weird way. It seems like we all have a weird trail of how we got in. But then you get in, and we're all competitive. We all want to win. We all want to beat the other guy. We all, it used to be we'd break out in fights. I mean, I'm talking fist fights, okay, in the stands, okay, things like that, and in meetings and things like that. But then after a while, it's like, okay, let's go grab a beer and some dinner, and how can I help you? So it's really a brotherhood that is screwed up in a lot of ways, but also beautiful in even more ways than I could ever even describe. And that's the part of it that I love about it is you're wanting to win, but at the same time is you're also wanting to give back to what you love and the game you love. And you see those young guys who remind you of yourself, and you say, that's me 30 years ago. Let me give back to them how somebody gave to me, how Mel Didier did, how Bill Brick did years ago, how guys like that, and the audience will know who these people are as we continue to talk about them, which is important because these are characters that paid it forward.
They really are. There's so many movies that could be made, some that shouldn't be made, but many that could be made. But what I was going to say, and this has to do not just with scouting, but one of the things that I found in making this film, this whole journey of this film, has been people that were drawn to it. You talk about paying it forward. Doug Cornett, who's one of the co-producers of the film, I remember him saying to me one time, and I've never forgotten this, and I hear him say it a lot over the years, but when the first time he said it really hit me, he said, "What can I do for you?" And he's a film producer. He's been in the music business. How can I help you? And he said, "I want for, not from you." And that has been the theme of everyone that's been involved. I mean, the investors that we've had in the film, the producers, people, Gary Hughes, who it's like, what can I do to move this forward? Clint Hurdle, Dave Dombrowski, Billy Bean, Dusty Baker. I mean, every one of them was, what can I do to help? What can I do to help move this story forward? Because the world needs to know about these guys.
And if
about
the world
this
could be
profession.
more like them, sorry, I didn't interrupt you. I'm sorry, but if the world could be more like them, would you live in a much better place?
Well, that is, I do feel it's true. I mean, again, it's this big. Oh, Tim Corbin, the coach for the Vanderbilt Commodores. Oh my God, what an amazing! What an amazing guy he is.
And what he's built with that program, he's built it on the backs of what can I do for you and how can I help? And, my good friend, Scott Brown, who I coached with at St. John's, is their pitching coach. And he's just like that as well, too. He's a what can I do for you? How can I help? And look what they've built. It's amazing.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked about, I want to, Mike, if we can bring in, I want to talk a little bit about, because we talked about the good old days and you were talking about the competition and how you'd fight people in the stands. I heard so many stories that I am never going to be able to use in the film, so I want to share some of them. And one of them, the next one, is from Roland Heyman, who was with the Diamondbacks, right?
Yes.
Before he passed away. And when I first met him, he was approaching his 90s, and he ended up passing away maybe 4 years ago. 3
or 4 years ago. Yeah. And he was in amazing, he had all his faculties until the end. He was really an amazing man.
This is what I remember. This is what really blew me away, is that it was 2016, maybe. We were at the winter meetings in Scottsdale, and I found out, maybe through you, but somebody from the Diamondbacks let me in on this. He was starting to have some issues moving around. He was, maybe he wasn't remembering things as much as sharp as he has always been. I mean, the man was amazing.
Yeah.
but I remember seeing him at a game and seeing him surrounded by fans at spring training. And there was somebody that was assigned to drive him. It was so touching to me that the Diamondbacks had somebody who drove him wherever he needed to go, went and picked him up, made sure he got there. And this man is in his 90s, and the Diamondbacks are relying on him. Let's watch.
Absolutely.
But this is a story. I'm going to set this up. This is a story that he told us, and I don't know if I hope the volume works. I'll try to turn it up when we go into editing because it's a fabulous story. Go ahead.
Cool night, and we had top coats that night. And when we get into the house, Rosie Gilhausen looked around, and nobody was looking from the family that had stepped out. He took the phone off the hook and put his coat over it so that no calls could come in. And we were supposed to have a half hour, everybody a half hour appointment. And Rosie said, we're not getting out of here until we sign up. So then all of a sudden we see 4 eyes looking through the window, and he puts a shade on them. And they were the scouts, the 2 scouts from of Charlie Finley's athletics. And then finally we got them signed. And when I walked out, I said, sorry guys. Oh, were they angry? You could hear them screeching away from the driveway, the street with their tires, you know. So we weren't popular that day, but we got the player.
God, I love that. It was truly one of my heroes, and the reason for me being in the game too as well. So he's really paved the way for a lot of us.
Oh, and he had one story after another. And I didn't, in all the years that we interviewed, there was nobody that didn't mention his name, how he influenced. If you said anything about, and it wasn't just scouting, because he was he was a front office executive. He's the head of scouting development. I mean, he started the Professional Baseball Scouts Foundation, which was the foundation, and we'll do a little bit on that in one of the episodes.
Fall League as well. Yeah, he
Fall League.
the Fall League. I have a quick Roland Heeman story that I have to tell, that I always tell whenever his face pops up. So this is 15 years ago. Kevin Towers is our GM. I'm new, and Kevin looks at me and says, "Listen, Roland can't see as well as he used to, so just help him out. Make sure you get him where he needs to go and all that stuff." And I go, "I'm your man. Don't worry about that." And we're in our meeting right after Kevin told me this, and Roland stands up. I'm right next to him, and he walks right into the glass windows and falls down. Towers looks at me and goes, "What the heck is wrong with you? I give you one job." And Roland gets up and he winked at me. He goes, "I heard it." So I still think he did it on purpose, just so he could get me. But it was just one of those things that Roland he kept you on your toes. And one of the things I have taken from him that he did till the day he died was he would always write a handwritten letter to you anytime if something came up that he wanted to tell you. It wasn't an email, it wasn't a phone call, it was a handwritten letter. He would call you too, but he always wanted you to have something of his. And I have letters in a shoebox in my garage from him that I'll cherish forever.
Wow. And that, that's something about when you try to identify who they are, when you try to describe them, it's really hard to find the right descriptors. But pranksters is in there.
Yes.
I am amazed at it seems to be, and I'm sure there are some straight-laced scouts or some that are all business, but boy, did we meet some pranksters.
I don't know many that are straight-laced, because it seems like everybody that we deal with has some kind of different personality. Some people are definitely more serious than others, but everybody is pretty much the same. We all love a good joke. We all like to laugh. We all like to laugh at ourselves, and we don't take ourselves too seriously. I go back to this. We spend our days wanting to win and wanting to get the leg up on the competition, but after it's over, we know. Listen, we're all living on time here. We're working in the game we grew up loving. Our friends are all out, are stockbrokers and are out working real jobs that they hate. We get to play a kid's game every day, and and hang out with young people and feel young all the time because of the energy that we have around us. We know we're lucky. Believe me, we know.
Okay, so I have one more clip in terms of the that not this isn't really a prankster thing, but John Odell, who's was with Cooperstown Hall of Fame. He is actually the person who put together an exhibit about Scouts at the Hall of Fame probably 5 years ago. I might be wrong on the dates here. Forgive me, John. Hopefully John's watching or listening. But I'd like to do the clip. He tells a little story about Tony Lucadello.
His way of operating was to misdirect other scouts so that they wouldn't know who he was really looking at. He had a great passion for secrecy. He would use binoculars to scout from a distance so that all the other scouts would be around watching a game, and he would be quite a ways away watching the game through binoculars so that they wouldn't know that he was also interested.
Anyway, it's just that whole thing of this, scouting is its own sport. It's
keep them off your trail, Molly. That's what it is. It's always keep them off your trail. There's not as many secrets anymore as there used to be, obviously, with technology and TV and video and all those things. Not a lot of secrets left anymore. But those guys, what they used to do, that from the stories of them, writing down their scouting report and just crinkling it up in front of the other scouts and throwing it in the trash, knowing that the scout behind them would go into the trash and take that out, and read what he had to say. And they'd write the wrong thing down on purpose, or they'd send you to a different city and say, did you see that kid down there in this city? And there was no kid down there. There was, they would make up the kid's name and you would go looking for him. That's how.
And that was back in the day when you wouldn't call ahead. You wouldn't have the internet to look it up. You'd drive 4 hours down the road. And
they would do that all the
time. Mike here, back out of my producer cave. The thing that I see with this story is there's definitely the story of a specific kind of sub industry that's super interesting and underdiscussed. And then I wonder if we can talk about this a bit, the kind of metaphor of being scouted. I know people you've talked to, Molly, and when I've talked about this project, as a thing that you're working on, people often are like, I never wanted to be a baseball player, but I wanted to get on SNL and have Lauren Michaels pick me out of an audition, or I wanted to be an Olympic athlete. There's just something, I think of every orphan fantasy story, like Harry Potter, actually we know something about you that you don't even know, and you're super special and are going to a dope school and learn spells. Can you just talk about the kind of broader idea and why it resonates with y'all of being scouted?
Molly, you want to go ahead or do you want me to go ahead?
You go ahead.
I think, most of the time when you're scouting a player, you're looking at the things that player has that might be different than anything else you've seen before. You're trying to find, that certain something that your team needs, or that, most players don't have. A lot of times with players, the best players don't even know how good they are, okay, until they get older and they see success and all that stuff. But, one of the greatest things I've ever heard, I heard a scout describe it like this, is, you're actually scouting the things that you're missing, you as the scout are missing, meaning that a lot of us weren't very good. A lot of us were, journeymen. A lot of us were, just okay or terrible even. But you're trying to scout that better version of yourself. And you're trying to find those things that maybe you feel like you were missing. And it's pretty deep.
I was just going to say, Chris, we are going there. This is what I live for this. I love this kind of talk. I love because that's the sense that you get when you spend some time with scouts. And I think it ties into what we were just talking about earlier, is dreaming for someone else. Wanting to be part of someone else's dream. It's not going to be yours, but you're going to be this part of it. And there's something, it's that thing, the piece that you're missing. And it applies to so many things in life. It's not just this, but it's true. There's an element of that in that.
Yeah, and you know, it doesn't end when you scout them and then you sign them. It doesn't end at that point, because a lot of times you have to still stand up for them within your own organization, because there's a whole contingent of people that want to get rid of that person. You know, and you're sitting in the office going, no, we need to keep this guy. We need to keep him for this reason, that reason, this reason. So, you know, it's kind of like if you've ever seen the movie Donnie Brasco, where Al Pacino's character is like, no, he's with me. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that part of it is so powerful, because you know, it doesn't end with you know, you just sign it and you don't just let them go. No, you follow them the whole time, because it again, like I said before, I really want, this is an important thing, and it's not anybody trying to be mean to the person or anything. They want their guy in there. You know, they want, you know, their person they signed, or the guy you gave more money to be the guy that you give the time to and all that stuff. So you as a scout are constantly pounding the table saying, no, give him time. You know, he might have failed now, but this is why he's not going in the future. So you're always connected. That connection does not stop. It continues to go the whole time.
And I've heard that, I mean, repeatedly with Gary Hughes and whatever. And I remember Dana Brown. I don't know if you know Dana from the Toronto Blue Jays. I don't know if he's still with the Blue Jays or not. But I remember him saying, he's your guy. Yep. He's my guy. And I, you know, from that day forward, he's always going to be your guy. And no matter what happens, it doesn't matter if he gets traded, doesn't matter if he leaves in a huff, he's your guy.
I've yelled at scouts, by the way, because I've been in a room where people are talking down about the guy he signed. And I may even be one of the guys saying, listen, we should get rid of that guy. And the scout doesn't say anything. And then after the meeting, I'll go, why didn't you stand up for your guy? Why didn't you say something? Do you not believe in him? You know, you got to get up there. And they're like, no, I believe in him. I just didn't want to say, no, you got to say something. You've got to have the guts to be able to stand up and say, that's my guy, you know, back off. And that's something that not everybody has. And I'm sorry, I don't think you can be a good scout and do what we do unless you have some guts to be able to stand up for the guy you took to the party, so to speak, you know, or the person you signed. You have to have that in you. And some guys just don't have it, you know, and I don't have a lot of time for those guys. I'll be honest with you.
Well, that's clear. That's fair.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Well, okay. I kind of wanted to jump around a little bit because, again, going back to, there was so much to say about, you know, why we're doing this. And this is the first episode, so this can be as loose as we want it to be, because it's our show.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can do whatever we do whatever we want. But I think the whole thing about them being hidden, I mean, the invisibility for me. And, you know, I wrestled with for a long time. It didn't make sense that I was so into this. I mean, it just did not make sense. It didn't make sense to any of my friends. In fact, I could barely even talk to my friends about doing this film because many of them aren't sports. They're mostly artists. They're mostly writers, musicians. But there was something about doing this. And actually, Mike, can you put it back split screen? It's easier for me to talk when I'm looking at Chris. But there's something about the invisibility. And I was like, I was, you know, I'm one for the underdog. I'm always rooting for the underdog. And to me, scouts seemed like the underdog, but I was wrestling with what is so compelling? And for me, going back to the personal thing, what we're missing, I stopped watching sports in my early 20s. I was, you know, again, the way that we communicated with our dad was through sports, and we were a hockey household. And I remember starting to feel invisible in my late teens. And so as a rebellion, I started feeling invisible. So I stopped watching sports. And then it dawned on me a few years ago, oh, it was that feeling of invisibility that drew me to the Scouts.
No doubt.
Which was a big aha for me. And I think it's something why, because, you know, as a filmmaker, you need to be real clear about your reasons for doing what you're doing, especially since it's a slog. It takes a long time. It costs a lot of money, you know, and it never gets done in the time that you hope or you promise or you know, I learned not to promise, but, you know, so it's like no understanding like what it is that draws you in. Just like what draws you to a player, you know, it's again, the intangible thing. And the fact that when I first started, even my friends who are baseball fanatics couldn't name a scout to save their life. And for this, Mike, can we? I just want to. I want to go to the clip, the fan clip, when we were in Bradenton, Florida, in 2015, and we went into the crowds and started interviewing people. And, asking them about, who they were there to see, who they were cheering for. And I just want to play this little clip. Do we have that clip, Mike?
We do. I'm pulling it up.
Oh, okay.
So if you're listening to the podcast, you're either not hearing this while I'm finding it, or
I'm going to be cutting, can cut whatever I can make it.
Or we're
smooth.
leaving it in, and it's making us feel real. It's making us feel authentic, and
this one, when we could do, when we do have sponsors, we can do the commercial now.
Yeah, here's the commercial. Yeah, here's your commercial break. Yeah, this is brought to you by Casper Mattresses. Okay, here you go real quick.
Okay.
Pirates and the Red Sox are playing. This is the last home game for the Pirates of the season here in spring training. So you're talking to some people and finding out who their favorite scouts are, if indeed they have one. Favorite team?
Oh, Pirates.
Pirates, without a doubt. Who's your favorite manager?
Clint Hurdle.
Clint Hurdle. Who's your favorite scout?
Scout. The Boy Scouts, I think.
Girl Scouts.
I don't know. I don't have a scout.
You don't know any scouts.
Favorite scout? That's a good question.
Scout.
Oh, that I don't know.
Tonto.
Who's your favorite
outta
scout?
here.
Who's your favorite scout?
Scout? Come on, I don't know any
Who's your favorite
scouts.
scout?
You. Yeah, there you go.
I think part of that, Molly, why nobody knows a scout, and part of why we may not be necessarily in the Hall of Fame or things like that, is because we have lived in the shadows. We have been, the kind of people that have given the credit to everybody else all the time. And instead of beating our chests and saying, no, I had a hand in that, I did that, and all that stuff, we got left behind a little bit. And, I think, some of us are comfortable with that, even though I want to see those scouts get in the Hall of Fame. I want, the Mel Didiers, the Bill Bricks of the world, to be in the Hall of Fame. I think part of it is, and we have to wear it on our own. We may, we didn't beat our chests hard enough. That's why I love that we're doing this now, that we can actually bring some attention to it.
Yeah, I agree.
I just thought it was crazy no one that's spring break is the To Kill a Mockingbird fan.
What?
I didn't hear that. What's that?
I'm going to try it again. I just thought it was crazy that no one at spring training is like a To Kill a Mockingbird fan, and that's their favorite scout.
I just got it. Sorry.
I just got it. I'm slow. Sorry, I missed that
So
too.
you did hear me, you just didn't get it? Okay. I think you should leave
No,
it
now
alone.
I get it. I get it now.
I'm going back in my hole.
You were cutting in and out. Hey, can you also bring up the next clip, and then we'll talk a little bit more about this. Bring up Ken Rosenthal for us. I know for those who aren't baseball goers, you may not know who Ken Rosenthal is, but you've seen him even if you're not a baseball fan. Ken Rosenthal is a journalist, a sports journalist, and is a on-the-field reporter for MLB. I have that right, don't I? Yes.
Yeah.
He's on the field reporter for MLB, and he also writes for The Athletics and many other things. And he's an amazing human being.
Amazing writer, amazing human being. He stands up for scouts all the time. He's amazing.
He's a lovely, lovely person. I can't say enough about him.
Well, scouts are kind of the hidden gems of the game in many ways. You don't see them, at least a fan doesn't see them. They're at the games. You can see them. But if you see them behind the plate with their radar guns and their books, you don't know who they are. And yet these are people who know how to evaluate players. And really, that's the most important thing an organization does. That's how you win, by evaluating players. And then coaching them and training them and all of that. But you first have to know whether a guy can play. And that's where scouts, even in the age of analytics, play a vital role. Numbers can tell you a lot, and they do tell you a lot. But at the same time, there are things scouts sees, whether it's in mechanics, anything. Maybe they find out something about a player off the field. You never know. But they have a way, the best ones do, of knowing whether a guy can succeed.
He sums up exactly what we saw in the clip before. And now you do see them. It's a little bit different than the old days because now you can tell a scout sometimes. I mean, especially if he's standing there with a radar gun.
And I have to tell you, Molly, as well, we were advancing the playoffs. So we were advanced scouting in the playoffs. I had the Rangers. There were a lot of fans that would walk up and talk to me and, what are you doing? Why are you guys here? What are you looking for? And I have to tell you is, we were, that stadium down in Texas is relatively new. So I didn't really know how the ball played in the roof with the roof and everything. And I had a fan tell me, when that roof opens, that wind really swirls up there. I wrote that down, on my thing. So,
wow.
So there was a fan interacting with me. They started it, and they actually gave me some information because the roof was closed the whole time I was there. So I had a little bit of information, but they are more willing now to walk up to you and talk to you and all that stuff. Hey, when guys were in Philly, there were fans basically throwing stuff at them, which is cool in its own way too. I mean, listen, I don't condone, violence or anything like that, but at the same time, they were doing it in a way where, like, they're really good fans, by the way. They were doing it in a way where it was like, hey, you're at our house, kind of thing, which is cool because then we're part of it again. So
I don't feel like you're in Philly if you don't have something thrown at you.
That's 100% right. You get great food, you get something thrown at you, and you get great fans. So yeah, for sure.
So again, this is our first podcast, and we're going to be a lot more detailed. But one of the things that I hear people ask, the people that get curious, a little bit curious, they want to know, so what does make a great scout? What makes a good scout? And before we talk about it, I'm thinking it might be good to take a couple clips.
A good scout's not just an evaluator of talent. He has to be a detective in a certain way to find out all he can about the young players. Even more so today. He has to be a weatherman too, because you have to be on that phone to make sure you're in the right city at the right time. But he has to be a number of things.
The part that scouts play with the 278 Hall of Famers that are in the Hall of Fame with their plaques, somebody had to find them. Somebody had to find the diamond in the rough. Somebody had to find the needle in the haystack.
What makes a great scout? It's the guy that looks into a player and sees the intangibles and is able to say, this guy is going to make it to the big leagues.
I'll see like 1,400 players in, over 3 months, and I'll come up with our list of guys that we've targeted that can fill in, can jump in, and who knows, maybe they'll become a David Peralta, maybe they won't. But every once in a while, I'll call Mike up, or I'll call Mike Russell up, and I'll say, hey, look, this guy's better than what we have in AA right now. This guy is better than what we have in High A right now. So we have to sign them right now because they're a potential big leaguer. Because, one man's garbage is another man's treasure.
That's my favorite quote. I just wanted that in there for the quote.
It's the truth. It is. The one man's trash is another man's treasure. It is. And we go to that scrap heap a lot and bring people out of it. So yeah.
Well, so when you sit around with somebody and you're sitting around talking about other scouts, and I'm assuming you do that you talk about, yeah. So what is it to you now? And maybe this has changed over the years simply because there are more tools, which I'll call, analytics and data is a tool. What is it for you, like off the cuff, that makes a great scout?
It's just an incessant amount of curiosity. Okay. You've got to be so curious that it hurts. You've got to be, what am I missing? You take FOMO and you take it a million times down the road. You have to have that feeling of you want to find the guy, and you're not going to stop until you find them. And that's the whole thing. And everything that they talked about in the clips previous were dead on. Okay. But those things are not found unless you are extremely curious to find what makes a player tick, curious to find. And this is the part that most people forget is, you have to find the perfect piece in the puzzle. You can't just find a player that can fit on any team. You've got to find the player that fits on your team. And especially the kind of scouting that I have to do now is because a lot of the players that I'm scouting now have to either go right to our big league club and fit right in our clubhouse, or play a certain position, or be a certain kind of a player. Maybe they play multiple positions. Maybe they hit for power, maybe they run. But you've got to find what fits for your specific team. And that's not easy because you're at the liberty of what's out there a lot of times, and you have to just find the right fit. So you got to be always curious. Then you find them and you say, okay, I found them. Next. What's next? Find the next guy. Still, like I said earlier, still be there to defend your guy, have his back, all those things, but find the next guy, okay? Because they're going to age out. These guys don't play forever, so you just have to be ready to find the next guy.
The thing that you say about curiosity, again, because I always think of in terms of this whole love story, because every scout that I met, pretty much, I won't say every single, but most of them, part of what was so, to me, endearing and striking was their curiosity about everything. But you always left there feeling like you were the most important person in the room. I mean, when they were talking to you, when Gary Hughes is talking to you and asking you questions, he is zoning in. And then meeting all the people that I'd met, a number of players that he had signed over the years, and they all adored him because they felt seen. Which is ironic, is that scouts have this ability to make other people feel seen, and yet they are probably the most invisible. So I think that there's some irony there, and poetry. I mean, there's poetry in that.
People forget that we spend most of the year in a hotel room by ourselves. So when you do get the opportunity to be able to sit down with somebody, and like I said earlier, pay it forward, you're also excited that you're getting to communicate with somebody else. We're spending birthdays and sometimes holidays and things like that in a hotel room or on a plane, and everybody's always like, oh, you're probably in first class, you're probably, this and that, and those things are nice, but, you certainly would rather be having some human connection. You'd certainly like to be paying it forward to somebody, or home with your family, which you miss very much as well, too, which could be a whole other episode. But no, those
which
things
will be an episode. We're going to do a whole thing on what it is to be married to a scout, what it is to be the daughter of a scout or the son of a scout. We have all this material. We got to use it. And it's just so fascinating. Somebody's going to end up ripping us off and making a feature film about some of these stories because they're just so good, and they're welcome to it. The other thing I want. Yes, it's good for the game. And the one thing that I was going to say is I just wanted to comment. I so appreciated, just so anybody that's watching or listening to this, because we had hiatus when COVID hit, we had to stop. We stopped us in our tracks. We lost our funding. That's the honest truth. And then COVID hit, and we lost a couple scouts. We lost Gary Hughes during COVID. We lost several people, and it was just a very tumultuous time. So it took a couple of years to kind of get back, find our legs again, and get running. And when I called you and said, "Listen, I need you to send me some clips of. I want to follow the draft process this year. I want to. Can you help me with this?" And we didn't have the wherewithal to go follow you. But I got umpteen clips from you on the road, actually very well shot on your iPhone, I must say. So I
shout out to the iPhone. Yes.
Shout out to the iPhone. But I just so appreciated that.
Potential sponsor, Apple.
I told you we needed him. I love him. But I loved those clips that you sent me. And they really did help give me a better feel. And I'm sure that anybody that is going to see them, and they will see them, about what it is that you would sit and talk to me about what you were looking at, what city you were in, what you were looking at. And this was before the draft. And so I know you couldn't give me any state secrets or anything, and you couldn't name names, but it was kind of interesting to hear the process and to get those little clips from the road.
Yeah, and it was actually not so much the draft for me, but it was more the trade deadline for me. Okay, that we were trying to
Right.
break down who we were getting at the trade deadline, and it was funny because I had to be careful, as you know, of not mentioning any names, not knowing exactly what ballpark I might have been in. But I can't mind. There were so many scouts when I was shooting that on my little iPhone that were like, "What is he doing over there? What's going on?" They're looking at me. So there was this whole feeling of why is he doing this and all this stuff? Is there more to the story? And I didn't tell anybody anything. So there more is the sport within the sport, like we were talking about earlier. So it was my pleasure to do it.
Exactly. Well, I'm thinking we should probably wrap up our first episode. This has been a lot of fun. I hope if you're listening that you have found it compelling and interesting enough to want to come back and join us for the next one. We don't know what the next episode's going to be, so that'll be a little surprise. But tell your friends, tell Nike. Now I'm turning into Mike. Anyway, thanks so much for doing this with me. I wouldn't do it with anybody else.
I wouldn't do it for anybody else. So thank you.
Well,
so I appreciate you very much.
I appreciate it. And Mike, love you for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, really looking forward to the next one. So that's it. We will see you anon next time.
Molly, before I forget, one of the things the Scouts and I have been talking about is, we've got to do a sit down and a video session of storytelling. One way we keep old Scouts that have passed along or passed on, like Bill Brick and those guys and Kevin Towers, how we keep those guys alive is by telling old stories. And, there's so many stories to tell, but, when we'd come to Cincinnati, for whatever reason, Bricky would walk in the stadium early on a Sunday, and he would yell, "I want to see a little vinegar out of you guys." And none of us really knew what that meant, but after Googling it a few times, it meant, I want to see a little hustle out of the Scouts today. Always keeping us on our toes, always making us not be complacent, not be just, going through the motions. But today, you're going to see a little vinegar out of me in honor of Ricky. So here we go, little vinegar today out of me.